everyone, it's Nick Campbell. This week's episode of Fear the Walking Dead is called The Dog, and while there's a dog in it, it took me a while to figure out why a dog was the centerpiece of this episode. Nick seems to be the only one that's actually friendly with this dog, and when it came time for them to escape, they sacrificed the poor pup to Peter Dawson, eater of humans, hater of bounce houses. I suppose this isn't their dog. No one seems to know its actual name, and Peter seems to just want to kill off the rest of the Cruz family in some zombie revenge for daring to celebrate a birthday on the edge of the apocalypse. Doesn't seem like a great neighbor. I'm assuming this has a lot more to do with the Jack London discussion from episode 1, which would make a lot more sense because Travis is the big star of this episode, for being the burdensome weight that will end up killing them all. Travis's rejection of guns and his wholesale denial that these ghouls that are eating pets and stalking his children as anything but horrible monsters might sound familiar to you. Hershel was the same way before Rick and the gang rolled into the farm. That didn't end too well for him. Although come to think of it, Hershel was kind of doing alright before Rick the Dick showed up and told him all of his ways were wrong. But this episode made a big deal of the difference between pacifists and survivalists. Travis sits squarely in the position that these people are sick and they need help, whereas Daniel the demon-killing barber feels like it's him against the world and that he doesn't have time for that kind of dead weight, or compassion, or uppity daughters.
Fue tu idea no enseñarle español, ¿eh?
And while Travis may not exactly be dead weight, we know from previous experience in The Walking Dead of who's right and who's wrong, and what philosophy will pin them down, and what philosophy will let them live another day. And waiting for the cavalry isn't necessarily a good thing. We know that cities become ghoul raves.
Ghoul rave? Cowabunga.
Because the government failed to protect its citizens against zombies that are created by death. But I like this show's commitment to the sentiment that people would still believe in the government, especially if they had contact with these walkers before. What normie feels like they could fend off an army of monsters better than an organized militia? You know, other than your uncle in Arkansas with his own arsenal. I don't know how many people are watching this show that haven't watched The Walking Dead, but I'm so curious about how these unicorns are perceiving what's happening. Do they see Travis's comfort in the military stepping in as a win? Or do they see the doom that we see? Are they confused by why people assume that these walkers are dead even though they have little more evidence than the meta-knowledge of the title? And do they think that Maddie's quick leap from remorseful self-defense killer to willing euthanizer is a step too far? Fortunately or unfortunately, most of us have advanced knowledge of what's going to happen, and that kind of matches the horror aesthetic. We all get that "look behind you" and "don't go outside" feeling that you get from slasher movies, except on a grander scale. We know all these people are doomed, and all of their decisions are terrible, but only because we know what's going to happen. We know who's behind them, and we know who's outside. Which is why when Maddie tries to hide the truth from Alicia, that I feel a combination of sympathy for a parent that's trying to protect her child, and campy foreshadowing because all of her actions are futile, and she says it out loud in a way that's equivalent to someone saying, "I'll be right back." It means that Alicia's going to get a wake-up call very soon. And she does, at the hands and mouth of Susan, her old neighbor who may or may not have overdosed on pills, thereby turning her into a walker. What's surprising is that with the truth, we get a reaction from her regarding her dying boyfriend, but the show moves on so quickly that she never gets to really stew in that tension, which is less of what's promising about this show and more like its predecessor, which is disappointing. I mean, the familial tension is still there, and Kim Dickens is crushing it every week, so an off-tone episode won't kill the show. But why I like Fear the Walking Dead is because of its pacing, and things are picking up really fast. I'm trying not to let it hurt my feelings. But this show also takes opportunities to say things, and it makes me want to pose a question to you all. More than a couple times this episode hints that antisocial behavior will lead to growing the zombie horde that will eventually kill us all. This franchise is about survival and doing everything you can to continue as a human. The insinuation that Susan died from pills is like extra condemnation for suicide. The value of human life is more than just the inherent value of life itself, but also that the loss of that life creates another predator. If forced death is a crime punishable by more ghouls added to a growing army, what does that say about those behaviors? I'm not saying that murder and suicide are things that should be considered to have a bright side, or that this show is somehow darkening a silver lining. But it does add a cost to death and a benefit to survival in an enterprising way. It's like people that believe that conservation tags are necessary in order to save a species. You can't kill things willy-nilly. It'll come back to bite you. Literally. And then you'll start biting things. And the riots, which are violent outbursts conflated with humane protests, start to lose their humanity when people are being attacked that had no part of the criminal activity that sparked the unrest. An officer is eaten in the streets, and looters are too interested in their destruction in order to notice the line being crossed at their feet. And other police are too busy cracking heads to notice what's actually happening. So, what is the show trying to say about this kind of public unrest?
Ya es demasiado tarde.
As far as the dog goes, it was a mostly mediocre episode, but not so mad that I'm losing faith in the series. The tension in pre-apocalypse Los Angeles is still compelling, even if we know that all these characters are doomed to the collapse of civilization and that most will probably perish in inhospitable and harrowing conditions. Yay! We have a lot of people to think about in the coming weeks and a lot of tension between all of them. And some zombies or whatever. Thanks for watching.